The course opens with a welcome session that will set the scene and the tone for the 2 days of training. We'll look at the origins of mental health first aid, we'll look at how that fits into local and national mental health first aid strategies, and we'll also get straight into our first group discussion about what is mental health. We'll think about that question, we'll hear some different definitions, and we'll have some discussion. On top of that, we'll make some agreements as a group to keep everyone safe and talk about what is appropriate conversation and what everyone's comfortable and not comfortable with. After the welcome session, we will start to consider attitudes towards mental health and inequalities that might create conditions that could be challenging for different people's mental health. This will give you a chance to set some context for your own workplaces and environments, but also to maybe open your attitudes and your thinking around how other people might be impacted or influenced by external factors. At this stage, we'll also have some discussion and thinking around stigma and where that plays a part in regards to mental health in terms of people seeking help, being able to think healthily about their mental health and being able to move forward when there's a challenge. We'll try and find places where stigma maybe emerges for you in your workplaces or your attitudes, and we'll also look at wider stigma that we can start to challenge as mental health first aiders. In the substance use section, we'll have a broad look at substance use and misuse and how that can impact someone's mental health. We'll try to understand why people might turn to substances to self-medicate and how dependency can become a challenge in regards to mental health. We'll try to understand the reasons for self-harm and look at some of the known risk factors for self-harm. We'll have a think about the attitudes towards this and also where someone might find support if self-harming is an issue for them. We'll watch a film of someone talking about their own experience of self-harm where they explain the challenges that they had but also who helped and what helped, and we'll use that to set the context for our first case study about self-harm, and that will also be the first time that you deploy ALGEE, which is the secret sauce of mental health first aid. ALGEE is a mnemonic. It's a framework for a way that we're going to think about the conversations that we have about mental health first aid. You'll dive into that mnemonic in a lot of detail through the course, and you'll learn to sort of switch it on and off and use it when appropriate, a little bit like you would with things like CPR in a first aid course. The depression section can tend to be quite a relatable section for a lot of people. Experiences of depression are quite common in our society. In that section, we'll look a little bit at the clinical definitions, but we'll mainly focus on signs and symptoms and the conditions that might arise under which someone experiences depression. We'll watch an animated video of someone's experience with depression, and then we'll have some discussions about what we can do in terms of supporting people with depression and signposting them to the right places. That will then allow us to look at our next set of case studies and deploy ALGEE once again. Psychosis is probably the most complex and the most broad of the mental health conditions that we will look at on the course. You will get a very broad strokes umbrella definition of psychosis and hear a little bit about some of the experiences that people might have. We will then really focus on the distress and the mental health challenges that psychosis might create for someone. We'll watch a dramatisation of a person experiencing psychosis and look at the approach and the attitudes of the people that try to support that person. That will really inform us to then use ALGEE again to think about how we might support and listen to and signpost someone that's experiencing psychosis. The suicide section of the course can be one of the most challenging, but one of the most rewarding and profound parts of learning in the course. It really is the meat on the bones in terms of mental health first aid. We'll think a lot about risk factors for suicide, the reasons that people might be considering suicide, the attitudes towards suicide in our wider society, and then we'll go on to talk in detail about how to ask about suicide so that you can feel confident when you have a situation where you're worried about someone that you'll know what to do in terms of asking them and also helping them to get to the support that they need. As we learn more about different mental health conditions, we'll also learn a lot more about listening skills. In fact, there's a whole section dedicated to listening skills. That section is a little bit maybe lighter and more fun. We'll do a lot of different activities that get us thinking about using body language, how we have conversations, what it means to listen, especially if you're from the west coast of Scotland and you interrupt all the time like I do. And we'll spend a lot of time thinking about how we can sort of refocus and reframe conversations to make sure that the attention, the focus and the compassion stays on the person that we're trying to support. Anxiety, a little bit like the depression section, is something that broadly speaking is quite well understood and experienced in our society. In the anxiety section, we'll really look at when that becomes disordered and challenging and oppressive for people. We will think about the different symptoms of anxiety and how the experiences of those can make it very challenging to live your life. And we'll think about some of the treatments such as CBT or some other types of therapy that people might look at when they're experiencing anxiety. Again, that will inform a set of case studies that we will then use to apply ALGAE to think about how we would support someone who might be experiencing anxiety. Throughout the course and as a roundup towards the end of the course, we will have a focus on our attitude towards recovery and particularly the message that we want to send about recovery as mental health first aiders. We'll think of recovery as a very holistic thing, not just a medical thing, and we'll make sure that we are always trying our best to project a message of hope and that there is always a solution or a degree of support out there for someone that's having a challenge. We'll use that to wrap up the course, consider everything that we've talked about over the 2 days, answer any questions, and we will leave more knowledgeable and as successful mental health first aiders to go off out into the world.